In the past, we've taken extensive looks at some of the darkest moments in kids' franchises, often explaining them as what would happen when writers are given free reign on an episode. But unfortunately, they're almost always some type of just a dream or alternate timeline kind of thing. But what about when completely independent adaptations come into play, a separate continuity, where writers aren't just given free reign for an episode, but rather the entire series? Well, that's when you get some really messed up stuff. So today, we're going to be taking a look at 6 surprisingly dark adaptations of kid-friendly media.
Pokemon Adventures manga. Pokemon. There have been a plethora of Pokemon manga, but for the simplicity of this video, we're going to refer to it collectively as Pokemon Adventures, perhaps the most well-known manga of the series. The manga series is no stranger to death, violence, and even torture. For example, in chapter 14 of the original Pokemon Adventures, a Charmeleon fucking decapitates an Arbok. The Arbok's body falls to the ground, blood and guts soak in the grass as it helplessly twitches in pain. No fainting, no paying money. This is how the battles in Pokemon Adventures end. Death is shown prominently in Adventures, with the reanimated rotting corpses of deceased Pokemon in Lavender Town attacking the protagonist, Red, as well as Giovanni ordering his cloister to dismember a frozen Magmar. Death and abuse isn't limited only to Pokemon in Adventures, however. Humans, especially children, get their fair share as well. In the manga, many of the gym leaders and Elite Four members are portrayed as stone-cold villains, as opposed to the rough yet helpful persona they tend to have in games. For example, Lance the Dragon Master, champion of the Johto region, uses his Dragonair's Hyper Beam to completely decimate a large portion of Vermilion City, killing many innocent civilians. The gym leader of Fuchsia City, Koga, uses her Grimer to choke people to death, including Red, a child. Elite Four member Lorelli freezes people solid, leaving lasting realistic effects on their bodies like frostbite. To make matters worse, the end goal of the Elite Four is total genocide on the human race. This is not the innocent world we know from the games. The Pokemon Adventure manga series explores the reality of what it would truly be like if we had these creatures with such raw power at our command. Pure chaos.
Afterlife with Archie, Archie Comics. Afterlife with Archie does away with everything innocent and wholesome about the series, focusing instead on blood, gore, psychological horror, real social issues, implied incest, and just general unhappiness all around. While the characters in the original series are much goofier, with their character traits exaggerated in humorous ways, their counterparts in Afterlife are much more realistic. Betty and Veronica's silly little feud here is portrayed as full-blown hate. Reggie goes from a jerk with a heart of gold to an almost irredeemable homophobic jackass. The biggest change here is Sabrina's aunts, who are usually portrayed as pleasant yet quirky. Here, they are ruthless and disturbing. After Sabrina accidentally unleashes the zombie apocalypse on the world, they punish her by marrying her off to Cthulhu. On top of that, it's revealed that they've been sacrificing children from the founding families of Riverdale in exchange for their protection. And if that's not crazy enough for you, Josie and the Pussycats are portrayed as immortal vampires, who fought fascists and KKK members throughout history. Other notable moments include Archie bashing his zombified father's head in with a baseball bat, Reggie slowly losing his sanity as his girlfriend running over hot dog eats him alive, and Cheryl Blossom forcing her brother into an incestuous relationship, allegedly. The first issue sold out not once, but twice, followed by the next 8 issues selling out as well. Apparently people were just sick of Archie Comics and its goody two-shoes nature, and desired something more dark and grim. Well, they got their wish, as Afterlife with Archie spun off into a completely separate comic line, called Archie Horror. Some additional stories include Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, focusing on the darker stories with Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Jughead the Hunger, where Jughead is a werewolf and goes on a killing spree, and Vampironica, where Veronica is a vampire.
The Twilight Princess manga, The Legend of Zelda. Even if you consider yourself a hardcore Legend of Zelda fan, you'd be forgiven for being unaware of the manga series adapted from the games. Throughout its time, the manga series covered a plethora of titles, usually in a single book. This worked for some of the story-light games such as Four Swords Adventures and Phantom Hourglass. But what about arguably the most story-heavy title in the series yet? Despite the manga still going strong during its release, an adaptation of Twilight Princess was not developed. Not until 10 years later to celebrate the HD re-release on Wii U. So, what exactly was so fucked up about this adaptation that caused a 10-year wait? Well, quite a bit actually. Twilight Princess is already a fairly dark entry in the series, but the manga takes many of the implied disturbing moments from the game and outright shows them, on top of many new scenes. Starting right off the bat in Book 1, the scene where Ordon Village is attacked by King Balban goes a bit differently in the manga than in the game. Where Ilya and the kids simply get kidnapped as Link gets knocked out in the original, here they are tortured and beaten, with Ilya getting shot with an arrow in the shoulder. King Balban then grabs her by the face and implies that he intends to rape her. Following up on this, the Bokoblins taunt a helpless Link who watches his friends get traumatized. They then chop his arm off, blood and everything. As Link sits there in shock, they shove his face underwater and forcibly drown him. Of course, the gods revive him and give him his arm back, but the darker tones don't end there. Throughout the series, there's a looming realness that wasn't present in the original game. A grittier, realistic feeling that these characters are organic. They can bleed. They can die. Continuing into Book 2, the opening scene shows the backstory of Ganondorf, who was banished into the Twilight Realm for the crimes he committed in Ocarina of Time. In the original game, he is simply sucked into the realm. However, his fate in the book is much more unsettling. Instead of being sucked in all at once, he is instead taken apart bit by bit, ripping the very skin from his body, exposing his flesh and bones. This is just the current list of fucked up instances in the manga, but it's certainly prone to grow. The series currently has 3 books out, with a 4th being released in September of 2018.
Ren and Stimpy, adult party cartoon. So we ain't gonna lie here and act like Ren and Stimpy was ever really kid-friendly. But what if I were to tell you that its disturbing nature didn't end with the original series? Enter Ren and Stimpy, adult party cartoon. A try-hard attempt at raunchy humor that smacks you in the face with that fact by featuring alcohol, cigarettes, and a condom right on the title card. Despite his disagreements with Nickelodeon, eventually leading to his termination, show creator John Kricfalusi was eventually contracted by Viacom to create a new adult version of the series for Spike TV, aimed at male audiences. Given much more creative freedom than on the previous show, Kricfalusi took advantage of this and included much of the content he wished he could have included originally, such as making the main characters bisexual and turning Ren into a sociopathic abuser.
I dropped my ball! I know! I guess I'll bend over and pick it up.
The show was universally panned for being disgusting, upsetting, and unnecessarily crude, leading to only 3 episodes being aired, with the remaining 3 being released on DVD. A second season was planned, but was shelved due to the immense negative reception, leaving many of their episode ideas floating around as simple summaries on Wikipedia. The idea of the show was so revolting that Billy West turned down the role almost immediately after hearing the premise, claiming it was one of the worst things he ever saw. So, what exactly is the big deal here? What happened? Let's prattle off a few of the gags presented in a short amount of episodes. 1. Ren and Stimpy are in a loveless, sexless, and abusive relationship. 2. Ren tricks Stimpy into kissing a rat's asshole, covering his lips and shit. 3. Ren smacks Stimpy while he's pregnant, calling him a bitch. 4. Ren uses a saw to fuck Stimpy, and then not wanting to cuddle afterwards. Essentially, the whole show comes off as the Ren is a domestic abuser show. This is taken up to 11 in the infamous episode Ren Seeks Help. It follows Ren as he goes to therapy to discover the root of his psychotic behavior. The flashback here features Ren yanking Bug's legs off, burning them, licking them, and physically and psychologically torturing a frog. Once the frog asks him to put him out of his misery, Ren decides to let him live. Cutting to modern day, Ren murders his therapist, Mr. Horse, and then the frog finally commits suicide. Wow. Just wow. What's even more fucked up is that this episode was originally written for the original series. It's not surprising that this type of humor came from John K., given the recent news of his sexual harassment and pedophilia. The story of Ren and Stimpy adult party cartoon is morbid and upsetting. Billy West was smart to decline this party invitation. Bomberman, Act 0. Alright, so in the mid-2000s, a lot of kid-friendly properties tried desperately to latch on to the darker and edgier trope and failed miserably. This is hilariously seen in concepts like Shadow the Hedgehog and Lunatics Unleashed. However, the biggest and funniest offender is definitely Bomberman Act 0. The idea behind Act 0 was simple. Take a beloved, cutesy mascot character like Bomberman, with a simplistic gameplay, and give him claws and chains and shit, and throw him in a dystopian future where other Bombermen fight to the death. Yeah, you know when you can smell a bad idea from a mile away? This is one of those instances. Nothing about this game sounds like a good idea. It's like putting Yoshi in World War II or some shit. Anyways, the game is dark in the most literal sense, meaning you can't distinguish anything. Every level and character is the exact same gritty mess, and there are virtually no differences between the 99 levels. There's also a first-person mode for some dumbass reason, because every hardcore game needs one. And guess what? It's terrible. For the gameplay of Bomberman, we're seeing the entire map as part of the strategy. Having a first-person mode makes no sense. Also, it's not even first-person, it's third-person, so they couldn't even get that shit right. Bomberman Act 0 was universally despised when it released in 2006, with reviews citing its awful controls, ugly graphics, tedious gameplay, forgettable soundtrack, and laughably bad premise as its major cons. So, pretty much everything about the game. It's gone on to be listed on a number of worst video games of all time list, as well as being regarded as the worst Bomberman game in history.
Samurai Jack Season 5. This bonus entry is a bit different from the others in that it's not so much an adaptation or alternate version, but instead a continuation. Samurai Jack Season 5 is incredibly different from the previous seasons, almost shockingly so. It's a bit strange that it's the same continuity, as we go from 4 seasons where we don't hear a single curse or see a single drop of blood, to it suddenly being everywhere, especially in the trailers.
Our destiny is your death!
Very well. Aku destroyed everything. Gotta get back to the past.
Now, it's not like they're shoving it down your throat in an attempt to be edgy. Curses are rarely used in the final season, but blood and death are a large addition to the series. Throughout the original series, Jack never kills a living being, only robots. In Season 5, we see his first human kill, and the weight he carries with him after the act is done. He struggles with his decision heavily, and we see his internal battle with his mind, portrayed as an angry, almost monstrous caricature of the original series look. Blood is utilized here to show the change in Jack's views and personality over the years. The more mature themes even extend to his attempt to commit seppuku, which is a ritual suicide by disembowelment. Jack has become a broken man in the time since we last saw him. His failure to get back to the past has left him empty inside, and it appears that extends to Aku as well, who has shut himself away unseen for years. When hero and villain both lack purpose in life, it creates a truly bleak narrative. Not bad, but bleak, almost empty. While blood and war paint the final season of Samurai Jack, the true dark nature comes from within our hero, and how willing he is to simply give up and die. A far cry from the ever-determined samurai from seasons past, and a version of him that would most likely never exist had it not been on Adult Swim. Aside from the more serious, mature themes introduced in Season 5, we also see a more sexual side to the series that wasn't present in the original run, such as penis jokes and heavy sexual tension between Jack and Ashi. Season 5 of Samurai Jack is much darker and violent than its previous seasons, but it's not all doom and gloom. The tranquility and emotion the show is known for returns full force in a different, yet more mature way. The samurai has had a long journey, and his final quest is perhaps his most painful yet. But for the rest of us, that makes for one hell of a season.
Hanna-Barbera Beyond. As we mentioned early on, Afterlife with Archie was actually pretty successful, leading to issues being sold out everywhere and word spreading across the comics community like wildfire. Other comic companies like DC caught wind of this success and naturally wanted in. But what property could they have chosen? Well, instead of picking one, they just decided to make a whole line of dark comics based on Hanna-Barbera properties. marketed as Hanna-Barbera Beyond. First announced in January 2016, the series aimed to take many Hanna-Barbera characters and place them in either dark and gritty situations or into a bleak and realistically depressing world, all while losing their simplistic, cartoonish designs, opting instead for more realistic proportions and features. The first of the comics was Scooby Apocalypse, which is, yeah, Scooby-Doo and the gang facing the apocalypse. In this world, the monsters are real, and technology has advanced tremendously, giving the gang different types of guns and giving Scooby an intelligence-enhancing brain chip and emoji goggles. Surprisingly, this one turned out to be pretty successful, with its positive reviews allowing it to continue to this very day. The same can't be said for some of these other comics. Wacky Raceland, based on Wacky Races, isn't even that wacky. The Jetsons take the only real natural step into dark territory by creating a Black Mirror-esque future where technology rules our lives and removes almost everything human about us. And then there's the Flintstones. This depiction of the modern Stone Age family deals with a lot of socio-economic issues that are present in this day and age, which adds a sense of realism and vulnerability to the characters and the world. So far, the Hanna-Barbera Beyond line of comics has been a mixed bag of weird concepts that shouldn't work, and very weird concepts that definitely don't work. They have more planned for 2018, such as a comic depicting Snagglepuss as a closeted gay playwright in the 1950s, and an unknown adaptation of the Banana Splits.